welcome you this evening to a first time ever at CCA and first time ever in Visual and Critical Studies, which is the department that I chair, event. And I am so proud that it's at the initiative of one of our star students, Amanda Cachia, who has brought new dimension to the analysis of visual culture and made some permanent shifts here in the sort of consciousness around disability issues and how disability studies might productively illuminate artistic practices in the contemporary arena. And it is no mistake or accident that she has been advance admitted to several PhD programs who are competing for her. As we speak, I don't know whether she's actually caved yet and made a commitment to one of them, but I know that she's going to go on at the PhD level and continue to build on the work that she's done here, and that those institutions will also find her a force to be reckoned with, and will benefit, as we have, from her energy and sort of determination and vision. So this event is a product of those three things, and I know Mel wants to say a word of welcome as well, or Associate Provost at CCA, but I just really want to take the opportunity to welcome the participants, and also to let you know that one of our participants, Laura Swanson, was unable to join us tonight due to illness, but Amanda will be introducing those who were able to make it, including by Skype. So I won't say a word about that, but I just want to I had a great dinner with you folks, and I feel so privileged to be part of this event this evening and to contribute to hosting it. It's really a rare privilege. So, Mel?
We are, again, thrilled to have this event here at CCA. I want to particularly thank and commend Amanda. I'm sometimes more busy than I like to admit, and it too often takes a little bit of persistence to get on my schedule. So it is with that persistence and dedication to this project that Amanda and I spoke late last spring about hosting an event here. And even more important for me was the fact that she was very gracious yet insistent on contributing this to the dialogue around diversity at CCA. And so through that came and joined the President's Diversity Steering Group, which I chair, and has continued to sort of bring that voice to the table, which has been really important. So I want to thank you for that, Amanda. The President's Diversity Steering Group is dedicated to continuing the dialogue around diversity in its multiple facets here at CCA, and trying to continue to diversify who we are as a community and what we teach in our curriculum, and the kind of space and welcomeness that we have for everyone, and that this event adds an important element to that. So welcome and thank you, and I look forward to an exciting evening of conversation.
First, before I introduce my guests this evening, so first you'll see sitting to my right are two ASL interpreters. So first we have Patty, and then we have Rick here. So they are here, and I'm delighted that they can join us here this evening. The second point I'd like to make is we have a videographer in the room, and that is Indira. So thanks, Indira, for being part of this. And I'm really happy that the event is going to be on the CCA YouTube site in approximately 2 to 3 weeks. So we can all look forward to that for people who weren't able to make it tonight. I'd also like to, of course, thank the President's Diversity Steering Group. Thank you so much, Mel, for believing in my project and for making this happen. I'd also like to thank Terza and Kate. Thank you both so much for, again, agreeing to allow me to host this event under the banner of Visual and Critical Studies, and for graciously providing the catering here this evening. I'm also grateful to Southern Exposure, who awarded me with the Alternative Exposure Grant, and without them, again, this event wouldn't have been possible. And that grant allowed me to fly in some of our guests this evening. I'd also like to thank some other people here at CCA that have been critical to the project, including Jim Narina, Lindsay Westbrook, and Sean J. West. And last but not least, I'm very grateful to my guests. So thank you all very much for agreeing to be here, especially the ones that are from out of town and making the effort to join me. And I'm so privileged to call you my friends and my colleagues, and I've learned so much through your work. So just some background on me. I have had an incredible experience here at the California College of the Arts and as a student in visual and critical studies. I've felt really supported and encouraged by my professors and my peers in my work in disability studies. It's been a really fertile environment, and I'm really happy that this is the first time that CCA has hosted a disability-related event, and I certainly hope it's not the last. So here is my call to say I hope that you continue this really important work that needs to continue to be recognized as the field continues to flourish. Now the illustrious biographies for my guests. I'm actually going to ask them to introduce themselves this evening. So they're going to tell you all who they are and where they work or what kind of art practice they have, and their relationship to disability and art. So if we can begin with you, Rosemarie.
Well, thank you very much, Amanda, for this opportunity, for the invitation to come. It's a pleasure to be here, to meet those of you, and to be with my colleagues and friends on this panel. So, my name is Rosemarie Garland Thomson. I'm a professor of women's studies and English at Emory University in Atlanta, and I've been working for a number of years in the area of disability studies in the humanities, and I've worked and written about disability representation in a variety of different arenas, from literature to visual arts to the performative arts. In particular, and I think some of the most productive and interesting work I've done, at least for me, about disability representation has to do with freak shows and the performance of extraordinariness that historically was involved in those kinds of spectacles. So I'm looking forward to thinking about the spectacular aspect of disability representation in the world and what kind of cultural work it accomplishes.
I'm Millett-Gallant. I'm an art historian by training. I focus on modern and contemporary art in my PhD work. I got interested in disability studies because I am disabled, and because I was so interested in photography and performance art and work that focused on the body. And I sort of worked disability studies into that discussion. I'm the author of The Disabled Body and Contemporary Arts, which looks at the representation of the disabled body in contemporary art by disabled artists and by non-disabled artists. Putting those kinds of artwork in conversation with one another.
My name is Georgina Kleege, and I teach at Berkeley in the English department. I'm a creative writer, but I also teach courses in disability representation and literature, and also in autobiography. I'm here, well, I'll say, my recent books include a book called Sight Unseen, which is a collection of personal essays about blindness and sight, where I also talk about the happy coincidence of having been the blind daughter of two visual artists. So I theorize that a lot of what I know about vision and the visual world and the visual arts comes from that background. I also wrote a book called Blind Rage, Letters to Helen Keller. I think the title says it all. But my current work is continuing on the theme of blindness and visual art. I'm interested in examining and critiquing museum access programs for people with vision impairments. I'm interested in the long philosophical tradition which considers what I've referred to as the hypothetical blind man in theories about consciousness. And I'm interested in a growing number of highly acclaimed artists who are blind and visually impaired.
Hi, I'm Carmen Papalia. I live right now in Portland, Oregon. I'm doing my master's in fine arts in art and social practice. I have a writing background. I did my bachelor's degree in English and did a bunch of creative writing as well. I just started making art work, participatory, object-based artwork as of getting into grad school a year and a half ago. And I'm really interested in access as well. And I've found a lot of strategies in using social practice as a method for engaging audiences that don't often feel like disability is something that they can talk about or discuss. And yeah, so I've been working with museums lately, thinking about different modes of seeing and methods with which we can access visual material and space in general as well. So yeah, thank you.
I'm Sunaura Taylor. I'm from right over the bridge in Tobin. I'm a painter and a writer. I've actually taken the past year off from making art to write a book on disability studies and animal ethics. So I miss making art. I'm ready to get back into it. And I've been disabled my whole life, and I actually started exhibiting when I was 12. So I had this very long history of trying to figure out how to identify as a disabled person in the art world, and I've kind of come full circle from really not wanting to identify at all, and really wanting my artwork to just be seen, you know, as anyone would want their artwork to be seen, just on the basis of the artwork itself, to now really strongly identifying as disabled and also as a disability artist, whatever that means. So I'm interested in, you know, in what has kind of changed my feelings about that, and I'm just hearing what everybody has to say on the panel. So thank you all for coming.
I'm Katherine Sherwood, and I'm a mixed media painter and also professor of art and disability studies at Berkeley. I teach their class called Art, Medicine, and Disability. One thing I'm particularly interested in is going back through art history and sort of revising it within disability studies. I show my work at Gallery Paula Anglum, and in addition, Sunny and I are in a disability arts collective called the Yelling Clinic, and we are having a show at the Berkeley Arts Center in April.
Tobin, you're on.
Okay. My name is Tobin Siebers. I teach English and art and design at the University of Michigan. I've been working on disability studies for quite a few years. I wrote a book in 2008 that attempted to throw a bridge between literary and cultural studies and disability studies to try to help theorize disability studies and to also make literary theorists and cultural theorists aware of how disability studies would change how they think about the world. But for many, many years, really till the mid-'80s, I've been a kind of a, well, I can't dare to call myself a closet art historian because I've just been a closet reader of art history, I guess I would say, and worked on a number of projects, actually books that never met fruition. And they were sort of all a rehearsal for my book in 2010 called Disability Aesthetics, where I'd taken all my interest over the years and focused it on the realm of disability. And I really wanted to try to think about how disability emerges within the field of aesthetics, how it comes out. And I didn't know if I was very successful at that, actually, in that book, although it was part of my intention for a bigger project. But what I think I hoped to do was to at least give a thicker description of a concept that had been floating around for a while in many different places, done very, very well, of disability aesthetics, and to, I'm hoping to produce a beginning, you know, a foundational beginning from which other people could make departures. And I use that in the true sense of the word, in the sense that they could move on beyond what I've done, but differ from it, obviously, too. So I'm very happy to be here and among this crowd, whom many of you I know very well, and I'm very eager to hear what you have to say tonight about these works of art.
Great. All right. Thank you. So what I'm going to do now is I've put together a collection of images of the disabled body in different types of art. So I'm going to run that for everybody, and it includes a very, very brief audio description that I've recorded. And I have to say, and talking with Georgina about this, that it's not really an ideal audio description in that it's very, very brief. So it's not by any means ideal, as I said, so keep that in mind, but it's at least it's a start. And you may have noticed also that I've left some pieces of text around the table, and that in terms of accessibility, if anybody wants that in a larger size font, or I could also email that to people for those who might be visually impaired in the audience. So please talk to me at the end of today if you're interested in that. So bear with me as I try and set this up, and I hope I don't have any technology challenges. And I'm just going to minimize you, Tobin, while we do this. Sorry.
Here's some pity. Black and white photo of sideshow performer, stream of yellow urine. Painted brunette white woman in wheelchair balcony. Dwarf woman with face hidden behind an album cover. Visually impaired white artist leads line of people on walk in Oakland. Partially nude self-portrait of Frida Kahlo with her insides exposed. Outdoor marble statue of pregnant woman with no arms and shortened legs. Colourful abstract swirls of paint with two brains top left. Torso of woman wearing custom-made embroidered sleeves for hands with limited mobility. colourful grid of post-it notes on wall with handwritten messages. New York Times obituary cutting of Eartha Kitt singing dramatically into microphone. Photo of Korean American woman signing, "Let's listen with our eyes and not just our ears." Same Korean American woman making noise into a microphone. Pencil portrait drawing of young girl wearing sunglasses living the disabled life. Photo of male dwarf lying face first in a hedge. Left, index and middle finger making walking movement. Right, pedestrians crossing busy intersection. Black and white photo of white dwarf woman cleaning dishes in busy kitchen. Nude torso of white woman, word monster, handwritten in caps across chest. Painted pixel portrait of young African American male. Young white male staring at viewer with visible scars on shoulders and neck. Right profile portrait of young white mentally disabled woman, orange towel wrapped on head. Sculpture made of colourful strings wrapped repetitively to form abstract shape. Black and white photo of nude dwarf white woman, mask on face with elephant-like nose. Black and white photo of very tall white man looking down on his parents in their living room. Sculpture of white man in wheelchair with laptop precariously perched at edge of rocky cliff. Sculpture of an appropriated, now painted Venus de Milo. Nude white woman with no arms performing, projected white lines lace her body. Sculpture of white man lying on his side, fallen from wheelchair, also on side. Close-up of white woman's smiling, marked-up face who's undertaking plastic surgery. Bald white woman stares at us from her white gown and white sheets of hospital bed. 3 parts. Man aims rifle at man, man shoots rifle at man, man is hit on arm and bleeds. Close-up of white female torso with bloody tracing a star around the wall. Custom-made latex boots on scarred legs and feet. Video of white dwarf man inside the monitor of the 4-foot looming TV against wall. Older African American male staring into mirror, scarring on face. Sculpture of man's leg, grey sock, brown shoe emerging from gallery wall. Installation of framed objects on wall, including photo of blind woman. Painting of patterns, animals and man in portal at bottom, train on tracks along top. One nude white man crouching, holding the body of another nude white man, legs amputated below knees. White man hacking at his bloody, chopped arm with an axe. Black and white photo of partially nude, one-armed man and one-breasted woman sitting on bed. 4-foot ficus tree stands on left of doorway, 6-foot ficus tree stands on right. Painting of princess surrounded by her aides, including a dwarf woman of a similar size at right. A group of white male dwarfs in folk costume follow in procession behind white women. Colourful painting in Cubist style of little girl with her doll. Colourful photo montage illustration with winged creatures and little girl in yellow dress. 12-foot-tall transparent steel cube structures piled on top of one another. Silhouette of dwarf man and basketball player back-to-back, arms folded across chest. Calligraphic black ink line drawing a stick figure moving in wheelchair. Upside down blonde woman wearing white floating in black space. 2 lit lampstands, one 6 foot tall on left and one 4 foot tall on right. The end.
Tobin back up again. Sorry you couldn't hear that, Tobin.
It's okay.
So now that we've all seen the images very, very quickly, to give you all some snapshot, I wanted to first begin by asking everybody here for some reactions, first of all, to what you've seen, and to talk to me about images that troubled you or images that resonated for you. We could begin. Somebody wants to talk about that. Tobin?
Sure, why not? I actually am a bit disappointed that Laura Swanson isn't here this evening because her work actually resonated for me, and you know, the two pieces, the Untitled from the Together series and the double portrait, and the reason why it resonated for me is because it made me realize how very powerful the metaphor of the human body is when we encounter objects that aren't human bodies, and how we think about them along the lines of able-bodiedness and disability, so that when you have the two trees next to each other, you know, it's almost an automatic response to sort of say, oh, well, is this a younger tree and this one's the older tree, or maybe this tree that's shorter is sickly? And even when you look at the two lamps next to each other, where you're not dealing with an organic form after all, so it's hard to talk about one being, you know, sickly compared to the other, you still have the sense in that size of something being large and something being small, and the meanings that are the associations that go with, you know, largeness and smallness. At least I kind of realized that that's how I was thinking about those pieces, you know, aside from just taking them in all sorts of other ways, but that there was something going on in my head. And I suddenly realized, you know, I had this series of memories that came over me of thinking in similar ways over the years. So it resonated for me in a really interesting way. And here was a way of thinking about issues of disability in an extremely abstract way, because you didn't have a disabled body there, and yet in a way that actually really called on me. So.
Anybody else have anything?
I had a similar reaction, I guess, to the Picasso, because that's not considered a disabled form.
Right.
That it's considered cubism, where different parts are put together in unconventional ways and multiplied in different ways. And I look at that and I see a very unusual anti-conventional body, and I think about real bodies in that way. Whereas someone else who's trained differently or has a different bodily experience might look at that as, and it's just not what one would normally consider a disabled image. The same with the lamps or some of the other work. I didn't sort of feel like at first they spoke to me about disability.
I'd like to follow up on that as well. I thought that the images were really interesting and wanted to talk a little bit about how meaning emerges. And one of the ways that I talk about the forms and functions and behaviors, but mostly the forms and functions that we think of as disability, is that they are culturally unexpected. And that's what makes disability the spectacle that it is in terms of representation, certainly. And that one way to get the meaning established is, and this is I think what Anne and Tobin are both talking about, but just with different words, that juxtaposition creates the meaning, so that short becomes short when it's juxtaposed with tall. And I think disability representation works that way because we think of these forms and functions that are disability as that which we don't expect, that which is surprising to us. And I think that's what makes representations of disability, or what we think of as disability, be particularly compelling. I've worked with some of the images here, for example, the young man with significant burn scarring. So we have a juxtaposition here of the very ordinary conventions of portraiture with a very extraordinary and unexpected set of textual aspects that we read as this significant burn scarring. And so that combination of the expected and the unexpected together makes for an arresting image. And I think a lot of disability representation works that way.
Right. Does anyone else have anything to add?
I've looked at this a few times now since you sent it, and this may sound weird, but I've been trying to figure out why I don't get annoyed by any of the, like I'm not feeling annoyed, and I feel like I'm usually someone who sees stuff and gets quite annoyed by representations of disability that I feel like are stereotyping or stigmatizing, or just that are just so endlessly pushed in our faces and that we've seen too much. And one of the things that just occurred to me when just seeing it this last time was that on one level I feel like the images that I would maybe have problems with if I saw them in another situation feel more real and acceptable to me right now, because they're next to a whole ton of images that are showing and telling a very different story about disability. And the proportions are so different there, right? Like we suddenly have all of these images by disabled artists and non-disabled artists, but that are telling different stories about disability alongside these images that maybe are more typical. And yeah, so that was just an interesting thing for me to think about, was that in a way part of what frustrates me is that we don't see enough of these different stories that I think a lot of the images here by disabled artists are telling.
So just to be clear, you're saying that if you'd seen some of these images alone, standalone, you might have felt more annoyed by them, but because of the way that I've curated it, so to speak, the images together in that way that you don't, I mean, I find that really interesting, actually. Is that because you see that I've somehow created a balance in the images that have either worked for you and those that haven't?
Well, because I think like there's certain stereotypes, right, of like that disability is often used as like the grotesque or a metaphor for these extreme, like the sort of the boundaries of the body or how far the body can go. And there's this sort of brutality and monstrousness or something. And then, I mean, that's one side, and then there's also these sort of narratives of pity and stuff. But I feel like it's not that those narratives are completely untrue. It's that they're so within disability imagery, that's what we see. Those are the main stories that we're told culturally about disability. And so by seeing them in a context that also tells other stories about disability, that it's suddenly, that those become more real to me, that they become more acceptable to me. It's like just an aspect of disability.
Cinema is multidimensional.
Yeah.
different, and that's something I do in my writing, is sort of taking an image of the physical body and talking about all the contexts which relate to that image, and to think about the artistic. I was looking at the I think that you guys got new book, the profile painting of the woman with yeah, and I'm reminded of the profile imagery has this long history. It goes back to like Roman portraiture and also Renaissance portraiture, sort of give people status. It's also used a lot in anthropological and taxonomy studies to sort of show off the irregularity, or to show the deficiency. And so all those kind of contexts sort of come together and sort of make us, maybe those images play off of each other that way.
Though I would add that I don't think this is casual. You know, I think that there's a kind of a directionality that is beginning to occur. This is part of my argument that modern art, that we begin to recognize the modern in art as disability. So just to take two images, two examples that you have there, there's the painted Venus de Milo, which is the Rene Magritte piece. And, you know, what he did was he represented the Venus de Milo as disabled to us, in effect, for the first time by painting the left arm stump with blood red color, and then dripped it down the front of her garment so that it looks as if she was, you know, spilling blood. So it looks like a recent amputation. In effect, he's saying she's an amputee. And there's a number of pieces in the history of art that do that, and what the result is that it frees us to do work of that same kind. So to take Maya with a doll, which is the Picasso piece, you can look at it and say that the surrealistic, you know, sorry, I don't mean surrealistic, I mean the Cubist interest in deformation is actually a prototype for thinking about disability. You could begin to read it that way, in the same way that Magritte read the Venus de Milo. And so we can go back and we can discover disability in works of art where it wasn't clearly there to begin with, but there was a kind of a gesturing toward what we now see as disability. We can go back and we can recover it, and we can build our own history of art that allows us to move forward in really different and remarkable ways. But it's our own history.
Right. Can I have to pose this as a question because, you know, I wasn't seeing these images, I was just getting the description, but this for me became like a sort of parlor trick as I was keeping score as how many images I thought I could identify from Amanda's very brief descriptions. And there was Velasquez, Las Meninas, right?
Yes.
And then that was juxtaposed or followed by a photograph of people of small stature following somebody. Is that right?
Yes.
And in my, you know, in my mind, and I immediately go to sort of the long tradition of writing about the Velasquez, you know, and everything that everybody said about Mary Barbour and all of, you know, what she was doing there and all of that, and then just the juxtaposition with this other image, you know, and I don't know what that image was about, but I'm assuming that maybe that's what Sunny was saying about how, you know, if she'd just seen the Velasquez again, she would have been irritated. But to see it in this different context gave you another, you know, well, I can live with that sort of feeling.
Well, sorry. Oh, I was just going to say, I can actually look at Velasquez over and over again. Definitely, that sort of.
Mm-hmm. The most surprising image in the group to me was Chris Burden's shooting piece. a lot because I know Chris and I can't wait to tell him that he was part of a disability studies panel after hearing me talk about it for so long. But could I ask you why?
I was interested in being provocative mostly and putting in images that, you know, culling images from canonical art history as far back as Les Mills to more contemporary images from Marina Abramovic. Was a piece by her was also in there. Think about the relationship of afflictions towards the body, so that these artists, through the shoot piece and Marina's piece, what relationship could that potentially have through a disability studies lens? So I was trying to be provocative towards this group to try and see what they would say about that. I'm glad you brought that up, and I'm interested if anyone else has, if they thought that was just bizarre, or if they could start to bring in some kind of relationship with disability experience. Tobin?
Well, just in 3 words, I think that we're mistaken when we exclude wounding from the history of disability, the fact of the wound itself, because the wound is an extraordinarily powerful visual thing. And so I've thought a lot about, you know, combining trauma studies, which is the study of the wound, and disability studies. So I don't have any problem with it at all. In fact, I refer to Burden's work in my book, you know, as part of a body art that might be, you know, seen as, again, giving us gestures toward a history of disability art in its own right.
I was reminded with those images of the work of Bob Flanagan, who I think many of us know is a performance artist, and who created through this sensationalist work a kind of commentary on illness. Flanagan, you may know, had cystic fibrosis and had a lot of very painful treatments throughout his life, and was able to turn those experiences of pain into a kind of narrative of welcoming about pain. That pain was something he was comfortable navigating, and he made that into art. And of course, many of you maybe know he was most famous for pounding a nail through his penis in one of his performances. And I don't remember when this was, maybe in the 80s?
I'm not sure.
Or even earlier. And that kind of hyperbolic performance or hyperbolic representation, I think, is part of the effectiveness of some disability representation.
I also put in some images. There was a Hannah Wilkie piece in there, and also Orlan when she was plastic surgery. So I wondered if anyone had any reactions to those pieces.
I reacted to those because performance art really became popular in the 60s and 70s, and the early performance artists were really making a strong statement about putting their body as a work of art. And you know, we have others like Chris Bowden kind of like tailoring into their bodies. Or Hannah Wilkie in the 70s with the Scarification Object series, where she photographs herself in very stereotypical roles of the female, the pinup girl, I forget the other one. She crafted these little scars on her body out of clay or something. And to look at that in a sense against her later portraits of her own body going through chemotherapy. And so there's like a really embodied experience of the laceration or the injury. So, you know, some of those artists, maybe like Chris Bowden, I don't know much about him or his work. I just remember what I learned about him in art history classes. But that's sort of like the way of making your body a piece of art, the fact that you could like alter your body or even do destruction to it. set the platform to have some more contemporary artists to show their really unconventional bodies and unconventional body experiences through performance.
I just want to go back to something that Sunny brought up, which was how she wasn't irritated by the images when she saw them as a group, and so that actually leads me to for me, my most critical question for this evening, and I want to jump right into it, which is that I wanted to learn from everybody what you think are some kinds of strategies for destabilizing and decentering these what we consider to be reductive images of the disabled body in art. So it's a pretty big question, and I'm wondering, would that be a strategy? Would this, in terms of the juxtaposition of certain types of works to contextualize them, that could be a means for educating an audience potentially in terms of an exhibition. That could be one strategy, but I wanted to get everyone's feedback and thought about this very critical issue.
I mean, this might be a very boring answer, but I feel like so much of that destabilizing has to do with just access on a really basic level of like access to art school, access to galleries, access to museums, access for disabled people to even think about the fact that they can be artists. And I mean, I feel like what made this presentation not annoy me was the fact that there were so many examples of really interesting art that, as I said, talk about disability in these other ways. And I don't know that would have happened unless progress had been made in terms of access in other arenas. So that's important.
Well, I think that's important, that idea about access. And this is something I'm struggling a lot with, or I have struggled with in the past, and I've been struggling a lot with lately. I understand your question as more fully stated to be talking specifically about reductive forms such as, you say, the freak, the crippled, the deformed, the grotesque, the monster, what we sometimes refer to as infrequent. And so I'm not sure what it means to destabilize these images, or sometimes to calm them down or to neutralize them. I just, sometimes it makes me feel, it reminds me of something hygienic, that you're kind of cleaning them up. And I know there's been some really interesting work, and probably Rosemarie can refer to it, on the defense of the freak show as a way of really sort of maintaining a wilder or a more unconventional vision of disability in the face of forces that would want to tame disability. And so I'm trying to think about this in the context of aesthetics, and it seems that the presence of disability, has a number of contradictory reactions, a number of responses. And one response is just that we have from a political side is to try and defeat those images which are offensive. But I wonder if the artist has the same goal. If the artist achieves his or her end in the same way. Sometimes I think that the one tactic is to amplify that aspect of disability until you break through onto the other side, so to speak, that you reach a different perspective on disability by actually amplifying some of what you're calling the reductive representations of the disabled body. And I'm not very happy with my response here, or with thoughts I've had on my own yet about this. But maybe some of you have some ideas that go along with it, and or maybe amplify or make more clear what I'm trying to express right now, I'd be really interested to hear about it, because I feel that as a critic I have certain goals, but I'm not an artist. But if I were, and I try to imagine myself in that position, I sometimes imagine myself as having quite different goals.
It's probably a good time for me to actually pick on the artists that are sitting on the panel to talk about, you know, your own practices, what you're doing in your practices, and if you see there's some kind of political motivation in what you do in terms of disability rights. Talk a little bit about that at all, or, you know, even more interesting, at least for me, is that your potentially conflicted relationship with disability in making your work.
Yeah.
Carmen?
I think I can talk about that. Like, I don't have like hardly any education in disability studies. Like, I kind of just came into thinking about this through like doing it, and I guess early on I tried writing poems about my disability experience, and I didn't really know where those should go or who should see them. I was living in a place where I didn't have people to talk to who were talking about disability. I had people who were working through like cultural identity and race and stuff, but I just couldn't, I was living in Vancouver, British Columbia, and I didn't really know too many artists who were working through disability, or writers even. And so I guess my first strategy was my first goal was to try to find public. And so I ended up like Googling disability at the time and finding Disability Studies Quarterly. And like that's the one thing that I like where I thought like, okay, well, if I'm writing about disability, that seems like a good place for my work. And I just didn't, although like when I learned terms like, you know, like crib poetry and stuff like that, I was like, I don't want my work called that. And I was kind of like struggling with that as like someone who's trying to, you know, make work about something that was about my identity, but like really trying to find like a productive way to talk about it. And so eventually I just like, you know, I ended up finding a lot of strategies to like solve a lot of these things in making like participatory work, because I was having these like intimate interactions with people who didn't feel like disability was something they could talk about or felt was relevant to them, but they were having interactions with me where they were like learning things, and they were thinking about access. And like, I mean, I don't, like I've been doing tours in museums where I'm allowing people to like walk through a museum with their eyes closed and be described to, and these are people who are sighted mostly, but it gives them the opportunity to consider access. And I think that through a lot of those ways that I've been working in interacting with people who don't feel like they're part of the conversation, like I feel like I'm doing important work. And like that's kind of like, because I feel like initially when I was making work, I was aware of like disability arts communities and all, and I acknowledge that that's like an important thing to exist, because I feel like there has to be like a first step and like a safe place and a place for people to work from. But I also think that you know, I think by engaging like a general audience, engaging like a you know, a contemporary fine art audience, it's kind of like opening up that conversation a bit more. So people who want to consider my work relevant to disability arts, that's cool with me. And if people want to like think of my work as being relevant to like a contemporary fine art conversation, that's also cool with me. And I think through that way of directing my work, I'm engaging people in a way that I feel is productive, I guess.
May I ask Carmen a question? I think one of the things we have been talking about that I think is really interesting and important is authorship and the identity of the author of a piece of work, and how that matters, and it matters how it matters in the meaning of the work, and how it can be communicated in the reception of the work. And part of all of that is the issue of identification and naming, self-naming. What do we call ourselves and why do we call ourselves that? I mean, that's a big question in terms of any human identification process. But you said you didn't want what you wrote to be called crypt poetry. I'd love to know why or why not that would be the case, and what that meant to you to be identified in that way, and how that identification might affect what you produced, what art you produced.
Well, I felt like I didn't want it to just be read by like a small group of people that were. I guess I felt like I was writing poetry, and I felt like it was ridiculous to call something other than just that. Like, I thought that it was ridiculous to call something crypt poetry when what it was poetry. And so I guess that was my issue with it. And I don't know, I felt like the label really limited its access points for like a general audience. And yeah, and I feel the same way. I mean, I feel like that's important though. Like, that's sort of, for me, like that crypt poetry label kind of that kind of works. It works in a dumpster. So that crypt poetry label works in the same way for me as like disability arts, and I feel like it's like and it's important. It's an important place to exist because like it's a necessary first step, and I know there's like so many access issues for artists with disabilities to make work and tell their stories, like all those stories that we were just told through images. But you know, but I think it also does limit that conversation to just a specific group of people.
And Carmen, if I could jump in, this is like something that I've been grappling with in my work as a curator and working with artists. Such a key issue is that the fear of being labeled, the fear of even having an association with disability is seen as potentially limiting. We don't want to be ghettoized, and yet, I can only speak for myself, a critical part of my identity, who I am, and I want to express that through my practice. And I know I can certainly speak for some people here that is certainly part of their practice. But how do we project that out into the world? Are we interested? What are our motivations in terms of being an activist or just wanting to produce work in the world? So you've really kind of brought up a critical issue that I know Sunny and I have had some really great discussions about, and I'm certainly interested in Georgina's perspective in terms of your writing as well, Georgina, about this.
Well, I have 3 or 4 things to say. One is, I'm sure this is a common experience for every disabled person in this room, that people will say to you, I don't think of you as disabled. And that's a compliment, right? And people are genuinely trying to be nice to you. Oh, I don't think of you as disabled. Nothing stops you, Georgina. You're so plucky. And lately I've been, this has happened all my life, and it always made me uncomfortable. And it was only, later in life that I sort of analyzed why. And one of the reasons is because you would never say that to any member of any other minority, right? You wouldn't say that. Because the assumption is that, of course, I want to be a normate. I want to be you. And so you're sort of welcoming me into your group. And I say, I don't want to be. I am disabled. That's one thing. The other thing, and this comes from being an older person, and with a historical sweeping vantage point. Back you know, and here we are in the Bay Area and the sort of birthplace of the disability rights movement. And I was from New York, so I wasn't here during all of that. But I was a student in the 70s, and I, you know, sort of got wind of what was going on on this coast. And there were, you know, there was activism elsewhere. Sometimes here we sort of make this narrative of that it was all just here and nobody else was doing anything. And I can remember being a student and sort of showing up at different meetings and things. And there was, and I always tell my students this because I think it's important to know that there was a moment where everybody started talking about this sort of collective disabled community. And before that, people talked about, well, you have your blind people over here, you have your deaf people over there, you have your wheelchair users, and then you've got, you know, this, you know, all these different little subdivisions. And, you know, sometimes we showed up in the same room, but we all kind of gravitated to different corners. And then there was a time period when suddenly people started looking around and saying, we all have something in common, you know, and that there's strength in our unity, you know, that we're more like each other than people outside this room believe. And that was an absolutely mind-blowing moment. You know, when this would come up in meetings, people would just be silent and gaping. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. And I always feel it's important to sort of bring that up and to say, you know, that in my lifetime to have a disability identity is so powerful. And I think part of what you were saying, Amanda, about, you know, what happens when you take all these images together, even those that which, when viewed independently, might be offensive, but sort of put together with images by people with disabilities, it has a different message, and that's something that I embrace.
Let's put another sign.
Yeah, I mean, I think it really resonates with everything Georgina just said. I mean, I know for me, for such a long time, I so wanted my artwork to be judged by itself, and I felt like it was impossible for it to be judged in a way that other people's work is judged if people knew I was disabled. And so I so did not want to identify. And I think over the years, I think the moment that really changed was suddenly thinking like, but what are my thoughts about just like what comes to my mind when I think of art by disabled people, or of crip art, or of disability art? And I realized that what I had in mind was like really bad, cheesy art. Like art that was like, you know, like postcards by, you know, and like really stigmatized, stereotyped art. And I think that being involved with the disability community in all sorts of different levels, like I've just met the most incredible artists and people who I so respect as artists. And so suddenly that term, this idea of being a disability artist, or of identifying as disabled, or being a crip artist, it takes on this whole other meaning, because I feel like what people think of as that is so not that. It's so stereotyped.